Now that I've laid the foundation for you for how to use everything there is to use in Smartsheet, you have what you need to start looking at a very specific use case. And I want to preface this by saying that whether you're a tax professional interested in the lesson on using Smartsheet for tax pros, or a bookkeeper or an accounting professional looking for the specific context of this lesson, which is how to set up an accounting or bookkeeping engagement in Smartsheet, I think everyone should watch this next lesson because you'll be able to see how the layout is the layout, but that layout can be translated into any number of different contexts. And for that reason, I don't go into as much detail in the future lesson on how to set this up for a tax professional. We're going to take a look at everything we've seen so far in terms of how to lay out the different columns, and we're going to lay out an entire year's worth of work in terms of what one running an accounting or bookkeeping practice might need to be able to do. Starting with the high-level tasks that have to go on every single month, such as account reconciliation and getting the statements to perform that function, all the way through to the things that get done on certain specific months, such as getting 1099s done in January. We're going to be very thorough and detailed in this lesson. There's going to be points at which you're asked to pause the video and get caught up. So if you haven't already done so, download or install Smartsheet on your computer so that you can follow along and create what I'm creating right along with me. Now let's go ahead and see what this all looks like. So we're managing a project. The particular kind of project we're managing is an accounting or bookkeeping engagement. I'm going to keep this somewhat more focused on bookkeeping rather than accounting, but I think you'll see how it kind of blends in. In a sense, you have the bookkeeping part that gets done first each month, and then at the end you have the sort of accounting level stuff, which has to do with review and analysis and those sorts of things. That's how I define it anyway. And as I mentioned in the write-up, whenever we're managing a project, whenever we need to reach a destination of some sort, we've got to reverse engineer it. I use the example of having to go somewhere in your car because that's an example of a situation where we do it without even thinking about it. When we need to get somewhere, we know where it is, we know what time we have to be there, and if I know I have to be somewhere at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I know that it's going to take me an hour to get there at least, then I start off by saying, okay, so I should leave no later than 2, and then as I mentioned in the write-up, if you're like me, I probably want to back that up 1 hour to 1 o'clock, because I just know if I plan on getting out at 1, I'll likely get out at something closer to 1:30 at best, and then at least I still have that extra half hour of buffer in case I hit traffic or whatever happens, so that I'm not stressed out, so that I'm not worried about making it there on time. I'd much rather get there early and sit in my car for 15 minutes and relax and read something or enjoy or plan for the meeting. Last minute, just kind of reviewing what I want to accomplish. It's just so much better when you do things that way. So why not apply the same approach to the bigger picture, a year's worth of bookkeeping services that you're going to provide? It's such a big part of what you do theoretically. You should certainly give it that due attention. So in the write-up, I laid out a very high-level look at what this might start to look like. And we're going to kind of start there in Smartsheet, and then we're going to get much more detailed. So the first thing I did is I created a new workspace called Value Inc., right? And I did that by clicking here where it says Create New, and I chose Workspace. Very simple to do. And when I do that, it asks me to name it. No problem. Once you've named it, you've got your workspace created, and you can start sharing right away by clicking down here and adding your collaborators. But if you're in the planning stage like this, I would hold off on that. Let's create the outline first. Let's identify what the tasks are. Then we can add in the collaborators. So let's create a new sheet. I'm just going to right-click anywhere in this white space, and I'm going to start with a blank sheet. I encourage you to actually browse the templates. The templates that Smartsheet offers are, first of all, numerous, and second of all, a great way to start getting ideas and learning how you can lay out something like this. And I want to be very clear and careful about how I'm going to qualify this, because I'm laying it out in a way that I've learned works well for me and in a way that has evolved based on my own direct experience. But the way I work with my clients might be different than the way you work with yours. So I want to be very clear that this is just to give you one idea about how you can do this. And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. Let me name this sheet, and we're going to call it Value Inc. Master Project, right? Because that's the client name. Or we'll say 2015 Bookkeeping. Okay, very simple. And notice when I do it, because I right-clicked right in here, it created it right in the workspace. Smartsheet knew exactly where I wanted that sheet to be. So let's click on it, and this way we'll go in to the sheet. Now that we've got the basic sheet created, we can start getting busy and lay out the outline. Once you've created it, you could start sharing it right away, and keep in mind that we're in a workspace here, so sharing anything in this sheet is sharing anything in this workspace. But I would suggest laying out the outline first. Let's get that done before we start bringing in collaborators. Why? Because then as you're starting to lay out the outline, depending on the kind of people you have working with you, in my experience, I would have people asking me all kinds of questions before I'm done and really ready to answer them, and in all likelihood they're questions that'll get answered by the time I've completed it, so that I'm spending unnecessary time answering questions I don't need to. So save yourself that trouble and hold off on inviting collaborators until you feel it's substantially ready for that. So we have our primary column. We're going to double click this, and we're going to call this the milestone /task, because that's what the primary column should be in a case like this, is what's the major thing or the minor thing that's being completed. And as we laid out in the write-up, the last thing with the end in sight is actually going to happen in January 2016. So let's put that in there. Right? And then what's going to happen in January? We're going to review 2015 with the client. And then once I've created 2 items, and this is part of what's happening in January 2016, I'm going to click this little indent guy. And notice that little minus sign comes up. That means I've now grouped it. Right, which means that I have created a dependency. I've said that January 2016, in order for that month to be complete, we're going to have to, one of the things we're going to have to do is review 2015 with the client. We're also going to have to complete our December reconciliations, right? And Smartsheet is smart enough to put that in the same group because I'm putting it right below. So if you want to start a new kind of major header, you may want to skip a line, or you can click the outdent button. We'll come to that in a minute. So what else are we going to do in December? This is where we're just laying out the task. Don't worry about anything to the right. Don't worry about dates or any of that kind of stuff. Let's just lay out the tasks, and then we can do the rest later, because this is my sort of stream of consciousness now in terms of what do I want to get done? What do I want to accomplish? What do I want this picture to look like? When I get to January of next year and I'm reviewing everything with the client, hopefully what I'm going to be able to do is show them how successful they were this year and how much of that, hopefully, I can say is attributable to the work that we've done for them, that we helped them stay focused on building and growing their business, because with us there, they didn't have to worry about the bookkeeping or any of that. In fact, not only didn't they have to worry about it, they were getting information from us out of the process that enabled them to make better decisions so that they were able to grow their business. That's hopefully the outcome we're going to be able to reach when we get to this point in the timeline. And incidentally, when I was doing this previously, or I should say originally, I laid out the tasks, and then within that I laid out each month of the year. So each task had all the months laid out, and that worked well. But when I started laying it out this way, at the suggestion of one of our colleagues, Sarah Laidlaw, by doing it by month and then within that the tasks, and this way you have the tasks repeated for each month instead of the months repeated for each task, I tested it out with one of the clients that was really using this a lot with me last year by laying out the first quarter of this year in this format, and he actually, I didn't ask. He wrote me and said, I like this a lot, the way you have it laid out by month. So, boom, that tells me something right there. Feedback is good. Now, let's go on. What else do I need to do in January? Remember, each month we're really dealing with the prior month, right? Of course, we're doing the current January bookkeeping, so maybe we should add that in as a task, and maybe that should go above December, because that's going to happen later. Remember, whatever's on top happens later. So I'm going to select December reconciliations complete. I'm going to hit the insert key on my keyboard, and that is a quick way to insert a line, and we'll just say January data entry. Right, so hopefully this day and age, that means we're downloading January transactions and keeping that current each day, each week, whatever it takes. So then we've got December reconciliations complete. And then once the December reconciliations are complete, let's hit the insert key. Then we can do review December financials. And what we might also want to do at that same time is review year-to-date financials. Now, of course, you might group these two, and what level of detail you want to go to is entirely up to you. For example, I could break up the data entry and say, well, the data entry is one part, the reconciliation is another, but because the reconciliation really happens the following month, I have that broken up. So be as detailed or high level as you want to be. That's entirely up to you. Remember, the other thing is if you have these duties separated amongst different people, then you kind of have to have them on their own line, because we're going to get to the part where we get to assign the tasks to somebody. So this is what January might look like. And then over here in Review with Client, here's one of the things I love about Smartsheet. I can add a discussion right here. And if you remember from the prior lessons, because I have this established as the primary column, it picks up the description from that. And now I can write comments. And for me, what I will do on something like this is I will write a description of how I want that meeting to go with the client, even though I'm going a year out, right? This is the end that I want to have in sight. And if you really want to get crazy and be visual with it, I might even throw up some inspirational quotes and images or something like that, just because that's kind of how I roll, so that I remember that this isn't just about numbers and tasks and organizing things. It's about seeing the picture, seeing the end in sight, arriving to that destination with room to spare, with time to spare. So that, my friends, is how I would begin to lay out the task. What I'd like you to do is get caught up with me. If you haven't already, take a Smartsheet account, take a free trial. If you're a student of schoolofbookkeeping.com, I believe we offer a good discount to students who are enrolled. One way or the other, get to this point. Get a Smartsheet account set up, get a sheet open, get up to this point with me. And then if you want, create a duplicate of this, which may actually have your variation on this theme. Maybe you have some other ideas about how you would like this done and laid out. By all means, I don't have the end-all decision here. I'm just trying to provoke a thought process within you so that you can think about how you might do this and how yours might look very different from mine. And in fact, if you do come up with some ideas that look very different from this, I would love to hear from you on them. So use our answers forum or use one of our public forums and let me and anybody else you feel is appropriate know what sort of variations on this theme that you may have come up with, what ideas you have, how you might have, or let's say you put it into practice, and maybe based on feedback from your own clients, you got some great ideas. I would love to hear them. So please do reach out to me and let me know what those are. Get caught up with me. Pause the video. This will conclude this segment of the video. The video will continue, so pause it. You'll see a pause point, and then once you're caught up with me, resume the video, and then we'll continue, and we're going to get the whole year outlined in this lesson. Okay, now let's think in terms of what are the typical monthly things that have to happen every single month. We've got a few of them here, and in fact, let's lay them out very specifically. And we're going to skip a few lines here so that we can, I want to get kind of a generic list that we can copy and paste into each month, right? So instead of December reconciliations complete, so that we can keep it generic, let's call it prior month, right? And it helps if I can click in here properly. Prior month reconciliations complete. And that makes it pretty clear that if I'm in January 2016 and it says prior months, we're talking about December, right? So let's copy that down, because that's definitely something that has to happen each month. Review prior month financials, right? That should happen every single month. And then you're probably going to send them to the clients. So let's send financials to clients. And here's an example of an area where you could get detailed and list the different reports that have to go out to the client each month, just so you have kind of a checklist to make sure that all the reports that are supposed to do. Now, of course, I wouldn't do it that way because I can define my set of reports that are going to the clients in my accounting software, whether it's QuickBooks or Xero or something else. QuickBooks, you have the Memorize Reports area. Same thing with Xero. You can favorite in Xero so that you can establish which things go to that client each month in terms of the reports. What else do we need to do? You know, before we can do any of this, you know what we need to do? We need to get the documents from the client. So gather documents from client. Now, again, we can be more detailed and say, what specific documents do we need? So what I'd be inclined to do here, actually, is list each bank and credit card account. I need the statements. Now, this is going to vary from client to client, because if your experience is anything like mine, some clients will give you access so that you can get this information on your own. Other clients don't trust you as much, and so they will provide you with what I establish with my clients. If they're going to give me the information and not give me the access, then I need a PDF, and I need a CSV file, you know, a comma-separated value file. It's an Excel file, basically, a very generic one that you can export from any bank website that exists out there. So I require both because the PDF will help me to reconcile, the CSV file will help me with data entry, and for that matter, importing. We use the batch enter transactions feature a lot in QuickBooks because we use the accountant's edition. So getting that CSV file goes a long way to saving a lot of time on doing that. And we can also use it to, in conjunction with things like Transaction Pro Importer, to quickly get the transactions imported each month. So these are things that you're going to have to decide in your particular case, how detailed you're going to want to get. So I wouldn't actually do gather documents from client. I would say B of A, statements received. This is ultimately going to be a task that gets assigned to the client. We're in a collaborative space. Remember, I'm going to add the client in. Amex statements received. Right, so these are things that are going to go into each month, and this needs to happen before I can get the reconciliations complete. So let's create that dependency, right? In fact, it needs to happen before even the data entry, right? So it's not the prior month reconciliations because these would have been received in the prior month. So what I really need here is I need all statements and, like I said, CSV files or whatever I need to get the current month data entry done. So data entry, click on here. Current month. And shift down arrow. A lot of the same keyboard shortcuts that work in Excel will work here. So if you haven't already, take the Mastering Excel for Accounting Pros course that we offer, because you'll learn a lot there that you can use here with Smartsheet. I've got them both highlighted. I'm going to hit indent. I can't get the data entry done until I've got the statements. So these two tasks are going to be assigned to the client. This task is going to be assigned to whoever it is that's on my staff that's going to be doing these things. Once we have this kind of layout established, and again, you may have more tasks. It might be payroll, right? So payroll may need to get done. It's really kind of part of the data entry process. So first we need the statements, then we're going to need payroll information, and that maybe we have access to. So again, how you lay this out is going to vary from client to client, and it's going to vary from consultant to consultant, depending on how they work with their clients. But let's say payroll is done as part of the monthly data entry. Now, of course, here you may have to break it up because how do they pay? Do they pay twice a month? Do they pay every week? So I would add subtasks under payroll based on how frequently payroll is done. So let's say it's twice a month. So first payroll, second payroll, right? And you might define it more like in terms of if it's the 15th and the last day, whatever it is. We're going to create these two tasks as subtasks of payroll. When these two tasks are complete, then payroll for the entire month is complete. And when that and the statements received has all taken place, then we can complete the data entry for the current month, right? And then the reconciliations based on all this won't happen until the following month. So I can't sort of create that dependency unless I wanted to stick that task in here and date it in the subsequent month. So again, these are all choices you can make. I'm not saying that this is the right way. This is just how I like to do it. So that, I think, is a pretty good list that we can create. So now let's get back into here. And we kind of already did it for January. So let's go December 2015. Right, and it indented it for me, so I need to outdent it. And now I can take my list here, and we want to make sure we have plenty of space in between, so I'm going to hit the insert key a bunch of times, Control down arrow, Control Shift down arrow, right? Control C to copy, Control V to paste, and let's indent everything so it all comes under December. Right, and now I can do this. So now I'm going to pause the recording. I'm going to do this for every month, getting all the way back to January of 2015, and then we're going to go back through each month and look at the month-specific things that need to get done each month, and we're going to add those tasks in. So again, I want you to pause the video, and when you resume it and you come back to the next segment of this same video, you'll see that I've got the entire sheet laid out for the entire year. I don't need to have you watch me copy and paste and move things around for an hour. So we'll see you in the next segment in just a minute. Again, pause your video and get caught up with me here. And as I mentioned earlier, if you have your own version of this, run it parallel. Do mine, follow along with me, but then have yours up where, which contains maybe the differences in terms of how you might do things. Okay, let's see what this looks like. And hopefully you have got yours looking something like this. So I've got each month of the year laid out all the way into the first month of next year. And as I scroll down, I'm backing up to earlier and earlier points in the year. Now we're going to take advantage of some of these minus signs and see what that does for us. Because as you can see, this is going to be a long list to scroll. So let's start zipping up the months that we're not ready to do yet. So I'm just clicking on these minus signs. Very easy. And this is also a way of testing. Sometimes my eyes don't line up 100% right. So I want to make sure that I really have each month at the top level, and that I didn't, because there were a couple of times off recording when I was doing this where it was kind of like I wasn't sure, and I realized I hadn't fully outdented something. So this is another way of ensuring that you've done that. Now another thing is, this is going to be a visual thing, is we're probably going to want to take each of these, because they're kind of like headers, and just give them some color. Give them some formatting so that they stand out. And now what I can do is I can use this Format Painter option, which is this little brush down here. It works just like the Format Painter in Word or Excel or many other programs. And just click it one at a time, and this way we can apply that formatting to each of these top level rows, right? So we're going to just do that real quick on each of these. Unfortunately, there's no double click for this like there is with Excel, such that I can just double click it and keep clicking down. You got to do it, one at a time. Great. Now let's save the sheet. Don't forget to save the sheet. Smartsheet's pretty smart though, so if you do forget to save, every 10 minutes or so, you'll see a little message pop up around here that lets you know it's been 10 minutes since you saved the sheet. So now we can go month by month. So let's open up January and let's see what other things need to get done in January before the month can really be said to be complete. One of the things that may or may not be obvious to you as you're going through this lesson is something that I found was inherent in the process of setting up a project like a bookkeeping engagement in Smartsheet. What I'm talking about is that, as you'll see, when I'm laying out the tasks, initially I lay it out based on the things that I know are going to be done every single month. What struck me was how easy Smartsheet makes it later on to go in and add tasks, because I don't necessarily know ahead of time where I want those tasks. But as I'm getting closer and closer to completing the layout, I do start to have a pretty good idea of what has to happen and in what order. You're also going to see how easy it is to create dependencies so that I can establish where one task has to be completed before another task can begin. And I think Smartsheet is really smart in the way that it handles this particular aspect of it. The one thing to keep in mind, and you'll see this in the screencast portion here, is that you're working from the bottom up. So the first task that has to be completed has to be situated beneath the task that's dependent on it. And sometimes my thinking gets flipped around on that, so that's important to be aware of. I'm excited to show you how easy and nice it is once you get this all laid out, especially when you get to the end and you see what the entire year looks like. Let's go ahead and see what this looks like. And one of those things, of course, is going to be 1099s, right? So let's add those in. And 1099s are due at the very last of the month, so let's just put them on top. It's one of the last things we have until the end of the month. I don't suggest waiting till then, because remember, there's a process as far as making sure you've got the W-9s. So now that I've said that, maybe it makes sense to grab this line item and click and drag it down. Let's actually put it near the bottom, right around the same point where we're gathering the statements, right, for data entry. That may be where we want this. And I'm looking at this, and it almost looks like I have these as part of Payroll. Do I? No, I don't. Perfect. So again, it's just visual, lining up, making sure it's, where it needs to be. So the 1099s I would actually put down here, because then we're going to have the subtask of gathering gather W-9s. I can't type today. Gather W-9s. That's a subtask. And then we want to, and before we even do that, which is why this is sort of last, remember, top down. Before we do that, run reports to see who needs to get one. Right, so we're going to run our reports by vendor, look at what we paid everybody, eliminate anybody who got less than $600, and so on and so forth. That's a whole separate course going into that process. And then all these sort of subtasks, maybe we want to color code them. That's up to you. So maybe we'd put a different color on this, make this gray. Just be consistent. That's the only thing I'd suggest. So now that we've established that that's how subtasks get coded, we might do it like this. Right, and we might even do the same thing here on data entry, right? And then, so these are high-level sort of standalone tasks, right? Send financials to client and so on. Great, so now we've got that laid out. So in January, we have 1099s to do. And in February, we might have other things to do. Every client in the state of California has to file a statement of information, and their due date for that depends on when they incorporate it. So you have to figure out which month that goes into. You get the idea. I'm not going to spend an hour in a video going through every potential thing that you might need to add here, but I want to show you the process of what it looks like now as you're going to go month by month and see what things need to get done. Right, certain high-level things, definitely should be in here. Like March, the corporate returns are due, or the extensions need to be filed. Right, so corporate returns or extensions filed. And even though the extension is filed, you still have to pay. So you might want to put in a subtask of that, or you may just figure it's part of this. That you have to, run the financials and come up with the projection so that you have an estimate. Or you might, if you're the bookkeeper, you might have to, and for that matter, if you're the bookkeeping service, you might have to run the reports to send to the client's CPA so that the CPA can come back and say, here's the estimate, right? They do the projections for you in most cases. And then that brings me up to if they've filed extensions, and I think we already kind of mentioned this. In October, if the, no, we didn't mention this. So in October, or let's go back to September for a minute. So in September, if they're on extension, extensions due. And it may be that it doesn't apply because they didn't file an extension, they just filed, in which case you would just mark it completed, and we're going to get to what that looks like in a minute. Then in October, what I like to do, and this is where you're really extending your service beyond what a lot of people might even expect and delivering delight, as we like to talk about it here at schoolofbookkeeping.com. Ownership extensions due, right? The owner of the company, who's your true client, if they filed an extension for the corp, then they must have filed an extension for their personal, because they can't do one without the other. So these are due. So you might want to come in here and add a discussion and make some comments about what sort of planning you might want to do to help them and make sure they have what they need from the corporation. Namely, make sure they've got their K1s. Make sure you interface with their CPA and say, hey, can I get a copy of the K1s? It's a good thing to have for your records anyway. And then once you have it, you can make sure the owner has it, because they're going to need it. Presumably the same CPA would be doing both, but just in case, it's not a terrible thing. I like, when I'm providing the bookkeeping service to the client, to have everything on record that they might need. This way, because I'm going to be the go-to guy. I'm the person they're going to come to when they can't find what they need. So that's why I like to make sure I have everything nice and organized and neatly filed away somewhere, such that if and when they do come to me and ask for it, I can quickly and easily find it and provide it to them. That's delivering delight. That's going way beyond and delivering amazing service to people. So now we have one more segment in this video, which is going to be where the other columns are going to start coming into play. So once again, I'm going to ask you to pause the video, get caught up. If you did yours and it doesn't look quite like this, but it looks close, that's probably fine. But if you want to, this is a good point to stop at and once again get caught up with me so that you can stay with me on this. And pause the video, and in the last segment of this lesson, I'm going to show you how we're going to now just lay out what you've already kind of seen in terms of dates and task assignments and completion. Now, once again, I have to stress that what I'm about to show you may not be what you want to try this at home, but do try this at home. All right, this isn't one of those don't try this at home things. This is a do try this at home thing. So do try this, as I've said every step of the way up until now. Make sure you're caught up with me. And now we're going to look at some of these other columns here and how we're going to use them. So probably one good thing to do is have a start date for each task, right? So we'll define it as a date, and we'll call it start date. And then the next column, of course, guess what? Yep, you guessed it. Due date, right? And this way, if you wanted to build into this process like a review, right? So we have the data entries all done once the payroll and the statement, first the statements are received and we get the payroll information we need, and the data entry for the month is done. We do the prior month reconciliation here. Then maybe what we'd want to do after that each month is have somebody review the prior month, and that's what really is going on here, is review the prior month financials. So remember, we have to consider the sort of dependencies here, right? So January 1099 start date. Well, we're not going to start it on New Year's Day, right? So let's say we started, and looking at this, the way the calendar lays out this particular year, I would say let's not plan on starting this on Friday. Let's start this on January 5th, right? This we could start the Friday, right? This happens before, so this we go back to January and say, right on the 2nd, assuming we're working, I don't know, maybe you're going to give your employees a long weekend. So it's either the 2nd or it's the same day, the 5th. We're going to start running the reports because this is not a long process, and this is the other thing you have to think through is how long is this task going to take? Can it be started and finished on the same day? Yeah, for sure this can, right? This might take a little longer because you have to figure there's going to be some lag time by the time you get responses from your clients and your clients' vendors and so on. So we're going to probably need a week to get this done. And look at that. Already planning this, you can see that doesn't give us a whole lot of time. So once this is done, so we can plan on doing the actual 1099s based on this. So on the 12th is when we expect we'll have everything. So we can start it then. And there may still be some lag. We can at least run the ones that we have everything we need for. And then over here we can say, okay, so the final thing, I would say I wouldn't want to wait till January 31st and say it's due then. I would want to say let's get it done by the 24th, because this goes back to what I said at the very beginning. You want to leave room and time to spare. So plan on getting it done a week before it's due. This way you have time to deal with any problems. And I've already talked to bookkeepers this year who have had problems that will cause this kind of process to get delayed, where vendors don't want to give you their information because they don't want you to send them a 1099. They don't understand that they don't have that option. Okay, so now here we're talking about a task that's going to be assigned to the client. So we're going to need I want the statements received on the 2nd of every month. I don't care who it is. I want those statements, and again, you might add in the sub-levels so that the client's clear that this means I need a PDF and a CSV file. Or you can put it in a comment, or you can put it in a discussion. And so these I'm going to say are going to be due on the same day as they start, right? Payroll, now, of course, this really should be in the reverse order, right? Because again, we're kind of working from the bottom up, so let's move that down. So the first payroll, let's say, gets done on the 1st, right? And obviously in this case, it's really the 2nd because the 1st is a holiday in January. All right, this obviously gets done on the same day. The next one's going to be on the 15th, let's say. So if it falls out on a Sunday, then this is where it's important to do this stuff, because now you get to think in terms of what happens if it falls out on a weekend. Do we pay on Friday or do we pay on Monday, right? And of course, this is going to start and end the same day. And so here I wouldn't necessarily put a due date because the payroll is obviously specific, but you could say all payroll is complete then on the 16th. Right, so we want to paste. If I right click, I can paste values, right? I can paste special values so I don't ruin the formatting. That's important. Let's hit a Control S to save. And then all data entry for the current month then really can't be finished by design until the last day of the month. So let's just say on the last day, on the 31st, really it's probably the 1st of the next month, but this kind of task I'm not too worried about being that specific about. We get the idea, and hopefully we're just keeping up the data entry every week at least. Prior month's reconciliations complete. I usually like to set as a default that this has to be done by the 8th of the month. That the last month has to be reconciled by the 8th, and that means all the financials can be submitted, and let's give a 2-day lag on something like this. So on the 10th, since that's a weekend, let's push it to the 12th. We review those prior month financials, and then of course the following day, let's just say, and just to make it quick, I'll copy that in. This way I can just go one day forward and copy that over. So this is how you're going to lay out the dates. I've done it for 1 month. You're going to do it for all 12 or 13, because remember, we're going 1 month into the next year. So now we're going to add in another column. I want to know with a checkbox task completed. And then we need a column where we can assign the task. Contact list. Assigned to. Boom, now this is all coming together. And we can leave this column out there in case we decide we need it for something else. The other thing is, I went over this in the previous lessons, I also want to know modified date. And now we're going to add a column to the right. I want to know modified by. Save. Of course, that's going to be me right now. And since these are kind of system columns, I actually like keeping them outside of the sort of formatting convention. One thing, and this is kind of feedback from my friends at Smartsheet, it would be nice if there was a way to say automatically expand everything here. And auto expand and auto collapse would be really handy features to have here. Hint, hint, friends at Smartsheet. Save that. And so this, my friends, is, I think, a pretty solid start to laying out your year's plan for getting a bookkeeping engagement done. Now, once you have one finished, finalized, completed, ready to go, then what you can do is you can come back over here, you can right-click it, and you can save it as a template. So now you have a template which can be duplicated over and over and over again for every client. Then you'll go back and change the specific stuff like Bank of America and American Express to whatever sort of fits that client. So that, my friends, is I think a pretty solid picture of what it looks like and how you might at least get started laying out a bookkeeping engagement. As always, if you have any questions, please use the answers forum if you're a registered student at schoolofbookkeeping.com. If you're not and you're taking advantage of this course on a non-paid basis, then please use our public forums, our Abo group on Facebook, or, well, that's pretty much it as of the time I'm recording this. And you can ask questions there, and I will certainly get in there and respond as often and as quickly as I can. As always, I hope you've gotten something out of this. I hope you've learned. I really look forward to getting your feedback in terms of, like I said earlier, what variations on this theme you might have in terms of things that you think will work well, or maybe if you've actually started to employ this, things that have worked well for you. The task completed, by the way, of course, is just that. It's a checkbox. And you just check it off when it's completed. And later on in the course, we're going to get into some conditional formatting, and you're going to see how I use that with conditional formatting to make it really visual in terms of really clearly being able to see when a task has in fact been completed. That's all for now, folks. Make sure you're caught up. Make sure you understand everything we've done so far. And then we're going to get into the next lesson, which is going to show you in a different kind of sheet how I deal with uncategorized expenses. I want to share with you a personal experience I had with respect to the use of Smartsheet with one of my own clients. In fact, the very first client that I started using Smartsheet with was the example of why I got more and more into using Smartsheet and why I got so sold on it as a solution for me in my own bookkeeping and accounting practice. I introduced Smartsheet to a client who admitted to me right up front that they weren't too tech savvy. And I wanted to be cognizant of that, so I thought, let me try laying it out in Smartsheet. I think it's fairly straightforward, and even for somebody who claims to not be tech savvy, it'll be a good test to see if this is simple enough for somebody like that. And I begun to lay out the tasks in Smartsheet. And the way I did it was I established each task, and within that I had each month of the year, so that as we go through the year, we could just check off that the task was completed for that particular month. First and foremost, the client got back to me initially right away and said, you know what, this was very straightforward, very clear, I knew exactly what to do. That made me feel really good about using Smartsheet, because now I know I can use it with just about any client. Then we got into the following year, the second year that I was using this, and I decided to tweak the way I laid it out just slightly. And it was based on feedback I got from Sarah Laidlaw, who's one of our active members in our Accountants, Bookkeepers, and Business Owners group. And she suggested that the way she uses it is she puts the month on top, and then within that, all the different tasks that have to be completed each month. So I decided to give that a try. It made a lot of sense to me. And without even telling the client, I laid out the following year, and I laid it out in that exact format. The client, without even being solicited to give me feedback, actually emailed me as soon as he saw it and said he liked it much better. I think this really underscores A, the flexibility that you have with Smartsheet in terms of how you can lay things out and change the way you've laid things out, and B, how simple it is for people to get how to use it, even if they're quote-unquote not tech savvy. Now you've seen how to lay out an entire accounting and bookkeeping engagement using Smartsheet as your project management solution. You've probably already figured out by now as well how you can use this in other use cases. Another thing that's inherent in managing an accounting or bookkeeping engagement are some of the what I call offshoot type things that need to be dealt with. And one that comes up almost always with every single accounting and bookkeeping engagement is handling things like uncategorized expenses. In the past, we found ourselves emailing spreadsheets back and forth, and it became very cumbersome to keep track of what changes they'd sent back, which ones we had updated in the accounting software versus which ones were new. And Smartsheet, as you're about to see in the next lesson, provides you with a great infrastructure for creating a collaborative environment in which you can lay out what the uncategorized expenses are, and your client can come in there and give you the answers you need without the back and forth emails and the mess in terms of keeping track of who did what, when, where, and how. I'm excited to show you this in our next lesson.